and welcome to episode 64 of This Week in Germany. We'll be bringing the world to Germany and Germany to the world with news for the week beginning the 23rd of March 2015. My name's Daniel.
And I'm Rob. Each week we bring you stories from the news, society, and culture in the English language. If you want to find out more, including ways to follow us on Twitter, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and Spotify, head over to our website, thisweekingermany.de.
In this episode, Greek-German relations have broken down into personal attacks, argues Der Tagesspiegel's Elisa Simantke. We'll be taking a look over the past week of absurd twists and turns in Germany's view of Greece.
Destination Germany takes a look at the Schwäbische Alb, a mountain range, and what it has to offer its visitors.
Our German of the week is Lara Likör, a transvestite who is a candidate to become mayor of Dresden.
All that, plus the rest of the week's news in brief, coming up. The saga of Germany's economic relations with Greece continues. The interactions between the two countries have, at times, taken a rude or even absurd turn. Most recently, parts of the German media have gone crazy over this video clip of Greek Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis.
My proposal was that Greece should simply announce that it is defaulting, just like Argentina did, within the euro in January 2010, and stick the finger to Germany and say, well, you can now solve this problem by yourself.
In that clip from a conference in 2013, he uses the middle finger gesture at the appropriate moment. It's known in German as the Stinkefinger. That will become relevant in a moment. Talk show host Günther Jauch had Varoufakis on his talk show to explain the Stinkefinger clip.
Der Stinkefinger für Deutschland, Herr Minister. Die Deutschen zahlen am meisten und werden dafür mit Abstand am stärksten kritisiert. Wie passt das zusammen?
The fact that relations are going sour is important. Greece owes Germany money, and the new Greek government is negotiating ways to pay it back. They want to avoid continuing tough austerity cuts from recent years. All in all, they are in debt by over 170% of their GDP, and Germany is the country's largest creditor. The recently elected left-wing anti-austerity party Syriza is now in charge of Greece's economy. Business magazine Wirtschaftswoche has described them as using a mix of policyless vulgar Keynesianism, pop Marxism, and dirigism with sex appeal.
So, what's the big deal about this old clip?
That's exactly the thought of satirist Jan Böhmermann. His TV show pretended that they doctored the clip to make it look like Varoufakis was showing the Stinkefinger to Germany, but the clip was actually real. They just pretended that they manipulated it.
And this confused the media, at least for a short time. Twitter was set alight with speculation.
That's right. After the claim by Jan Böhmermann that he created this video, which wasn't true, the media was speculating. Was this a fake, or was it a double fake on the part of Jan Böhmermann?
Through all this mess and discussion, it actually made a clear point. Why was everyone so worried about a stupid 3-year-old clip? There are bigger things to talk about.
Here's the satirist himself to explain.
Dass das Video ein von uns manipulierter Fake sei, ist absolut haltlos. Niemals würden wir die notwendige...
We would never ridicule the essential journalistic debate about a 2-year-old out-of-context middle finger or those seriously engaged in this debate.
Der Lächerlichkeit preisgeben.
To put it simply, German-Greek relations have broken down to absurdity. Both countries are reacting oddly. German Finance Minister Wolfgang Schäuble called his Greek counterpart foolishly naive. The other side have threatened to let a wave of Syrian refugees out of Greece to pass into Germany.
Last week, we reported how the Justice Minister threatened to seize German assets, such as the Goethe Institute in Athens. Bild, the tabloid newspaper, recently called Greeks greedy, and now have called Varoufakis a liar. Earlier in the week, before the spread of the video, Daniel talked to political reporter from the newspaper Der Tagesspiegel, Elisa Simantke, to get an up-to-date on the Greece-Germany debt negotiations.
Can you give us an overview on the current situation with Greece's debt repayment plans?
Yes, we can definitely see that it's a tight schedule for them to follow because at the moment they have some recent deadlines coming up. They had two within the last week, which was altogether about 400 million, and then there's a next one coming up about 335 million at the 20th of March. So the Greek government says they are able to pay it. They cut every expenditure or by the state which is not wages or pensions. So they are really trying to get the money together for paying that. And until now it looks like that it's still possible, but everyone knows that there is not much money left and that it's getting more and more difficult for the Greek government to negotiate and stand the time until there will be some more results with the EU and the IMF.
They were able to negotiate an extension to the bailout, which they didn't want, but that's only given them limited amount of time, hasn't it?
That's true. You don't know what's coming in June. If there's going to be a new memorandum of understanding, how they call it in Brussels, but this is something Syriza really doesn't want, or what they repeatedly saying they don't want it. And yes, and then there's these possibilities of maybe Grexit or Grexident or however you will call it if they refuse to sign a new program and the other side stays as tough as they pretend to be and don't negotiate about anything else, then we'll see where this all is leading us. But this is why they go on with negotiations every week now at the moment to at least reach one middle way or at least one sign of an understanding at the end.
So you mentioned the negotiations. How has Germany been involved in these negotiations?
Oh, officially, at the moment, this is happening more at the working level. So it's between the EU Commission on this area, the Troika, which you don't call the Troika anymore, but the institutions have a look into the books. They are negotiating about what Greek has to do about reforms, and the Greek are trying to get some easing on the social part. So this is not. It is not about the involvement of like Angela Merkel at the moment, but because this is always also a political negotiation, not only a technical one, you see that this is still important because Tsipras, for example, is coming to Berlin on Monday and he'll talk directly to Angela Merkel, and I'm very sure they will also talk about this stuff. So it's not only happening in Brussels, but the main part is supposed to happen there and yes, between the working levels.
Yes, and I think a lot of people in Germany have had very strong views about it. So there are some direct political talks going on. Even though the talks are meant to be happening on the European level, Germany is making its views quite well known, let's say. And if we look at the... Yes?
This is also because there are some topics which don't have to do with the debt situation, but are linked to it. For example, the discussion or the argument about the reparation payments, which is directly between Germany and Greece, which is not part, especially not part of the debt negotiation, but is brought up with it and is really very harshly discussed between Germany and Greece, and which is where we are in a really heated debate, though it doesn't have anything to do with the debt negotiations.
Well, if we just summarize what happened, I think it was last week, and we mentioned in last week's podcast that the Greek Justice Minister said in what is probably a very unrealistic remark, but he said that he would consider seizing German assets in Greece, such as the Goethe Institute and German any kind of German assets that were based in Greece, because he says Germany owes Greece hundreds of billions of euros from the war, even though there was a treaty signed between the former Allied powers which said that there would be no more repayments for what happened in the war. And it was just seen essentially as a remark which was meant to anger Germans rather than being at all practical. But there's been also angry remarks from Germans towards Greece as well. It's gone both ways.
It's just that you can, at the end, at the moment, in this heated discussion, it's nearly not possible for one of the both sides to say anything which is not taken as a provocation from the other side. So there are quotes picked out without any context in both media, so from Germany and from Greece, and you have kind of a ping pong. I don't know if you say it like that in English too, but you have kind of a ping pong. So he said, she said, he said, she said, and it's really like it's growing bigger and bigger without having often, not in every case. For example, for me, the reparation is a very special and very emotional and very huge issue, but in other cases you don't have any substance at all, but it's just like it's grown bigger and bigger and bigger, and at the end everyone is insulted and angry and cannot step back anymore. And I think this is something which really concerns me, because this is a very aggressive way of dialogue, and I often have the feeling that there are some people who are not in any way interested in de-escalation, that they want to see the backlash, whatever comes afterwards, in both countries. And I think this is leading to a huge mistake.
Well, one example which I can think of is Bild, the newspaper, very popular tabloid newspaper in Germany, started a campaign saying no to giving millions of euros to Greece, is how they put it, in a huge spread on their page, and they asked their readers to take pictures of themselves with this page saying no to Greece on it. And
I think that's the point where it gets dangerous. There's nothing to say against Bild's writers who want to tell the world that they are not agreeing with the latest decisions, but then to ask their readers to take a photo with that front page, it gets more and more a campaign which is also getting along with the language, and altogether it's getting very, very dangerous, because if you call them greedy Greeks, if you call them lazy, if you call them, it's not a way of having a substantial discussion at the end if this payment is right or not. It's not about that. It's about creating anger and frustration, and
it's characterizing the Greek people rather than the politicians. If it was that Bild disliked the politicians, then okay, that's the politician's job to be criticized and so on. But it's getting too close to anger at the Greek people, which is wrong, because the Greek people aren't the ones who made the decisions.
Yeah, and also it is the Germans forget about that they are also a conflicting party, and they pretend that we are neutral over here, and that what we think and know and do is all right because we are doing fine, and the other ones are the dumb ones. And this is kind of an arrogant point of view I would never understand, even if I would not at the moment travel always between Athens and Berlin and just experience it myself very much.
And there are people in Germany who are also anti-austerity, and we saw that on Wednesday there were violent protests at the opening of the new European Central Bank headquarters in Frankfurt. What happened there?
Yes, this is also a bit of a complicated issue, because this is kind of an anti-capitalism, anti-austerity movement, which is not only or German, because they are coming from all over Europe. And this is often the case with this kind of protests, that you have a part of it which is getting violent and discredits the rest of the protest. So if you see like burning cars, if you see smashed bus stops, of course it gets more and more complicated to talk about what are the reasons for the people to go for protests. And I honestly don't understand why they don't get it, why the organization doesn't get it under control. because it is the same with anti-G8 protests. Like every time you have these horrible clash photos, and then you have a huge reason for the critics of this whole movement to say, oh, this discredits any discussion you wanted to start. Because of course there are reasons to discuss about the current situation of Europe, the austerity policy and whatever, but like they are doing mistakes with burning a police car or smashing a bus stop. That's not
Yes, I mean, I should
difficult.
say there were thousands of people at the Blockupy protests in Frankfurt who were completely peaceful. But, of course, these are the people who need to shout down the violence, who need to keep it under control, because it does negatively affect the rest of them. And quite rightly, because that is the attraction for the media, is when things get violent, when things get out of control. And so it is up to these the organizers of these movements to categorically condemn that. And maybe they have, but of course the loudest voices or the most graphic images are the ones that are going to make the press. So
and you could see this coming, because there were also these protests were planned for years. Since it was sure when the ECB will open, you had these arguments about they also they shut out journalists. So this was a huge mistake by the ECB, I think, from the opening, because they said we cannot protect you. I don't know if you followed the news about that the last weeks. This is also like a dumb move. But, at the end, if you just need a reason to burn down a car, you can take any reason on that word. So it is not a political protest to me anymore if you get violent, especially in a situation like this. It's no revolution in Germany. There's no fights going on. You don't need to do this to have like a civil protest.
So we can see a lot of people are very opinionated, pro and contra, when it comes to the austerity or anti-austerity debate, tying in Greece as well. And if we come back to Greece, and the negotiations with the EU, and of course involving Germany as well, what are the next steps for the negotiations? You mentioned that Alexis Tsipras is coming to Berlin to talk with Angela Merkel. I don't know what they could get out of those conversations in terms of practical steps forward, but what are we going to see coming up next?
I think they at first want a cool down of the situation, because they have both finance ministers fighting very ugly at the moment. So I think they will just discuss a more general approach. But what you could see, for example, last week is that, or the last weeks, is that Greece was not able to pass any legislation in their parliament, because everything at the moment is refused by the EU Commission. So there was a bill which should be about social help, which was this 200 million bill. I don't know if you followed that, but it was a plan which was already developed by the last government to help the poorest of the poor with electricity. So it wasn't like a huge step or about minimum wages or whatever. It was just like a really, really small bill. And this was rejected with the argument that we have to talk about reforms first. So at the moment, there's a totally still stand. So there's nothing going on in Greece. And this is not even governing inside of the country. So I think they really need to progress on the EU level to be able to start working at home. So the next weeks will show if this progress is possible, if there's a total blockade by one of each side. So we don't know, which would lead to another step of escalation, or if there's any movement towards each other.
Elisa Simantke, thank you very much for joining us on another episode of This Week in Germany.
Thank you very much.
Now for this week's News in Brief. Edward Snowden caused a fuss at the world's largest tech fair, CeBIT in Hanover. He spoke via video link about cybersecurity as well as his personal life. He said that he would like to visit CeBIT in person. But the big news was not Snowden himself, but rather what journalist Grin Greenwald reported about the poster boy of cybersecurity. Greenwald claimed that the United States made a threat of cutting Germany off from gathered intelligence or inside info on possible plots concerning the country. Greenwald wrote that if the threat were carried out, the Americans would literally allow the German population to remain vulnerable to a brewing attack. This past Monday, sports officials decided to pick Hamburg over Berlin as Germany's candidate city for the 2024 Olympic Games. The key factor in this decision was a survey taken on public opinion for each city. 64% of Hamburg citizens were in favor of becoming an Olympic city, compared to only 55% in Berlin. Another factor was that of the environment. Hamburg won European Green Capital Award in 2011 and continues to focus on environmentally friendly, sustainable plans. Hamburg will need to build more facilities in Berlin, but this might be an advantage as they can do so in a low-energy, environmentally friendly way. Hamburg will be competing with other world cities bidding for the Games, including Boston and Rome. If Hamburg is chosen, it will be the first time Germany has had the Olympic Games in 62 years. It was Equal Pay Day on Friday last week in 23 European countries. Cabinet member Manuela Schwesig of the Social Democratic SPD political party has come up with a plan to help battle unfair wage payments between men and women. It's a transparency law that lets people check their salary against those doing comparable work. There's already a law that men and women should be paid the same. Despite this, a 2014 statistic showed that women, on average, make about €5 less an hour compared to men who work the same types of jobs. Manuela Schwesig is working hard to make a difference. With a new law recently passed about requiring more women in key company positions, as well as the creation of a minimum wage, the wage gap between the sexes is closing. And that's the news in brief. If you would like a quick and simple way to keep up with the latest from Germany, sign up for our weekly email newsletter, which you can find on our website, thisweekingermany.de. Coming up right now is Destination Germany. We're taking on a journey somewhere in the country that is well worth a visit, whether you're a tourist or a permanent resident, a foreigner, or a German citizen. Here, we'll be covering the famous sites as well as those little-known corners of Deutschland. All that matters is showing you that Germany is an interesting and exciting place to visit. If you enjoyed the destinations that we talk about each week, check out our website, thisweekingermany.de. We'll have photos of each week's destination.
We had a great destination last week. We got to tell you all about the Handel House located in the city of Halle in Saxony-Anhalt. The museum was the birthplace and now showcases the life of a great classical music composer, George Frederick Handel. And it just wasn't us. We also spoke with the director of the museum, Clemens Birnbaum, who was able to give us a great insight as to what visitors can expect to experience when they visit. Be sure to check it out, as well as looking into the Handel Festival that takes place in the city each year. But back to this week. What's our destination Germany for this week, Rob?
This week we're getting out of the city and back into nature. Our destination is a low mountain range in the state of Baden-Württemberg. I don't think it gets enough attention. It's called the Schwäbische Alb, and this mountain range runs a little bit over 200 kilometers in southern Germany.
Sounds pretty interesting. Any reason why it's called the Schwäbische Alb?
It gets its name from the region in which it can be found, called Schwaben, which comes from the medieval duchy of Swabia. Charlemagne, also known as Charles I or Charles the Great, came from this region. Today, when you look at Baden-Württemberg's coat of arms, the part that stands out the most, the center shield with the 3 lions, is originally Swabian.
What does this area look like today?
The mountain range itself is made up mostly of limestone, which was formed all the way back in the Jurassic era. Also, there used to be volcanoes here. Some of the volcanic activity from long since dormant volcanoes have built hills as well as craters in the area. Because of this, some of the area has almost a desert feel to it, as the soil is not very fertile. It's pretty amazing to see plains of land that are only made up of rocks and small brush.
So this land is all barren?
No, only some places have that desert look. Other parts of the mountain range are covered in forest. In fact, towards the southwest, the mountains run right into the Black Forest. In fact, the tallest mountain there, named Lemberg, is heavily forested. Visitors will have a chance to get a good mix between the unique barren lands where the former volcanoes were and densely forested mountains.
With land like this, what can travelers expect the weather to be like?
As these are not extremely tall mountains, the weather stays pretty moderate. In the winter, there's often snow, which makes it a pretty neat place to go skiing, while many other nearby areas are more crowded with winter tourists. And something else that makes the Schwäbische Alb unique is a small town called Stetten am Kalten Markt, which has a special microclimate and is known as the coldest spot in Germany.
Other than travelling through the mountains and plains, what else can visitors find in the Schwäbische Alb?
Hiking, walking, and biking are some of the big reasons to come here, but it can just be part of the experience. It's where your destinations lay that can be the real treasure of your trip. You can hike up to some castles, monasteries, churches, ruins, and old towns. And when you get there, take in the view from the mountains and see across the land. Also, if you want to get even more adventurous, you can try some rock climbing. They have some great rock climbing areas there. But check before you put on your climbing shoes and chalking up your hands. Many of the past rock climbing areas have been prohibited for environmental reasons. As for me personally, I want to get out my bicycle and take a day or two to explore the mountain trails while taking in all the natural beauty. Check out our website, thisweekingermany.de, for photos of the Schwäbische Alb.
Next up, our German of the Week section, where we put the spotlight on a prominent person from this week's news, who could be a German citizen or even a foreigner who we deem an honorary German, who's had an effect, for better or worse, on German culture, society, or politics.
This episode, our German of the Week is DJ Laura Liqueur. This transvestite living in Saxony has decided to run for mayor of the capital city, Dresden, this coming election. Political contender by day and DJ drag queen by night, Laura Liqueur has pledged to help clean up the city. She is running for the position with a political party that's known as a joke party in Germany, Die Partei. This is the same party who campaigned once to rebuild the Berlin Wall. Liqueur's campaign promises to help both rid the city of Pegida-type groups, as well as stopping Dresden from thinking only about its wartime destruction. One way she said this was possible was to tear down the world-famous Frauenkirche, which was destroyed during the Second World War and then rebuilt. By tearing it down, Liqueur believes that it will give Dresden the unity and showing that the city has been reborn. This would also allow rave party music-type events to happen within the church. She's also running on the premise that if people drink more and lighten up a bit, they'll feel much better. It won't matter your background or what your religion is. When you drink and party, everyone will be happy. The potential mayor will be running for election that takes place on June 7th.
That's the end of episode number 64. This Week in Germany is produced, as always, by me, Daniel Winter, and it is written and presented by myself and Rob Bishop.
Thank you to Elisa Simantke, political reporter for the newspaper Der Tagesspiegel, for talking to us about the Greek-German relations. Remember to subscribe to us on iTunes. You can also leave us a 5-star review there, which is one way you can support our podcast without spending a single penny. It really helps us find new listeners, so thank you for everyone that has left us a review.
If you'd like to get weekly email updates or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Spreaker, Spotify or SoundCloud, all the details are at thisweekingermany.de. Also on there, we now have a brand new features menu. You can go to our website and listen to your favorite clips from the show. Want a list of all the Destination Germany clips from the past few weeks? Do you want to re-listen to a recent edition of the Film Club? It's all there. Just go to the menu bar at the top and click Features.
We also have a new mission statement. This sets out our aims for creating the podcast, so check that out on the About Us page. Basically, it explains why we give up hours of our free time to bring you this program each and every week.
All that is at thisweekingermany.de. Thank you very much for listening. We'll be back next Monday with more of This Week in Germany.